So for those of you who don't know, this is Svetlana, our Russian Belarus 250 AS tractor, also known overseas, as in not in North America, as the Vladimir T25 tractor. This is I think 1992, 91, 92, I think it's 92, I can't remember anymore. Anyway, this is a newer model. I've been promising since the beginning of this project a couple years ago that I was going to do something about the fuel gauge. That time has finally arrived. As boring as that may be, I would like a working fuel gauge on it because you just don't want to run out of fuel on a diesel tractor. It's very inconvenient for repriming and everything, so we're going to do something about that. Let's take a look at it. So I have finally managed to obtain a genuine Belarus or T25 fuel gauge. It wasn't easy. I had to wait a long time for it. It's been sitting on my desk for a long time now because I haven't had time to get around to it. So, back when I did the initial wiring and some other things on this tractor, I don't know, maybe when I put the cab on, I don't remember when exactly, but I had shot a whole bunch of preliminary footage for the fuel gauge because we had a parts tractor for a while and that had a fuel gauge on it, and I thought I'll just put that fuel gauge on this one, and then some initial footage on, you know, does the float work and all those other things and getting it working up to the point of installing the gauge. And then I just couldn't locate a gauge at that time, so let's go back and start with that footage and bring you up to date to where we are now. Well, I think it's time to put in our fuel gauge up here, and hopefully it'll work. So let's go over to our tractor carcass over here and extract the fuel gauge. If the sender doesn't work, I might have to take that apart, but that should be easy enough. Let's extract that and take it over to Svetlana and hook up some electrons and see what happens. One side goes to negative through the fuel sender, and the other one goes directly to a fuse, which we're going to do here. Turn on our power. I don't know, shaking the gauge seems to, it's not moving. I guess we'll have to pull our sender out of the tank and check that out. Okay. Alright, so it does appear, well, if we can get a good ground here, it does appear that our sender is sending something, 11 point something ohms, 12, it's jumping around a little bit, but you get the idea. So it is sending something. So let's assume that sender works. So let's double check our wire from that I have labeled as the fuel gauge, because, you know, never trust your own work when you're me. Okay, hooked up to that wire. I get about, yeah, there we go, we're ticking up to about where it should be. That's about where it was. Well, it's all over the place, but, you know, that could be my alligator clips too, but alright. At any rate, we know that wire is working. So let's check resistance to ground through that wire. 156 ohms. 208, 209. It's all over the place. Our meter isn't very precise either, but we are getting a resistance on that circuit, so we should be getting something on the gauge. Our fuel gauge shot. Well, I had high hopes for this fuel gauge. Alright. Okay, well, that gauge is shot, I guess. So I pulled the sender out to verify. It's worth doing for a couple reasons, because if you are going to buy a new gauge or something, then you need to know what you're in for as far as senders or what have you. So, I don't know, this has 2 terminals on this, but yeah, see, I'm wondering. Let's see now. Not getting a very reliable reading at all. There's something written in Russian on it. Oh, I'm guessing we're not supposed to break that. Well, it says do not break in Russian. Well, we can fix that, but I don't know if that's too critical, but let's see. It appears that our contacts are okay, so it looks like I thought maybe one went to ground, but so this contact here is the contact on the other side of the resistance coil. The other contact, I don't know what this one is. Not getting anything there. Alright, let's try the ground again. Overload. Should put this over here so you can actually see it. Getting very just readings all over the chart. Okay, let's put it about the middle and see where that gets us. This particular one has a pin that appears to just ground it out when it gets to the empty point, so it has a low. When it gets to like here, that second pin just grounds it out. So the last little bit isn't even. Maybe if I exercise it a good bit. I'm getting various readings. Okay, let's see what it is with it all the way, supposedly with the tank full. It doesn't want to read, does it? 23 ohms, 30 ohms. And down here, it seems like it gets lower as it goes down. Like that. I think our float has a hole in it. Yeah, our float is full of diesel fuel. I can see some air bubbles up there at the top. I have to resolve that as well. Get the fuel out of our. Oh, it completely was filled. I looked down in the tank and I saw the float was not floating on the surface, so I figured it was probably full of stuff. By stuff, I mean diesel fuel. You can see it used to float at one time. It has this ring around it, but it appears that the hole is about around there where the metal hanger attached to it. I'll take this opportunity to clean it up too. Help us see if there's any other leaks. I'm gonna try to clean up this contact a little bit. Put a piece of sandpaper down in there. Just kind of work it back and forth on the contact. Gonna help clean it up. See if we get any better of a connection now. Good ground here. I'm not getting anything. Okay, so there we're getting a low ohm reading, which should be more resistance, I would think. Okay, let's move it to the full empty. Yeah, that's a high ohm, so high on the bottom and low on the top. We are getting, it's working better than before. My better meter for this. Digital meter is just work good. Okay, let's try this with our analog meter, which would approximate what the gauge is seeing. Dead spot in there in the high range, but that might be intended to be. Actually, that looks like how it's supposed to be. Oh, stretching our wire. Okay, let's see if I can get a good ground here. Still having trouble with that ground. capacity, full range. I don't think it can't really even go up quite that high because that's the top of the tank. So about in there. Now we slowly lower it down. Got our fuel sender back in with a hopefully repaired float. I don't know if I found something that'll stand up to diesel fuel, but we're gonna find out. Just got to put my wire back on there. This back on there. And I revisited my wiring diagrams, and I remembered that the case on these gauges is supposed to be grounded because it goes into the metal frame. And anyway, the case is supposed to be grounded, and I checked the wiring diagram, and sure enough, it looks like it might require a case ground. I don't know if just for the light or I don't know. We're gonna hook it up again and play with it and find out. Let's see what happens. So I checked, and this symbol, which would appear to be an A, is that's the ground. And this symbol over here, which kind of looks like a G, that is the power symbol for plus. Turn on our battery here, power to the fuse block, and we get nothing. I'm going to look down in that tank again and make sure the float hasn't sunk and see where we're at. Everything I can do is snake a grabber arm down there and pull the float arm up. So I snaked a grabber down there into the tank and pulled the float arm all the way up, and that's where she is now, and still 12 volts. There we go. Had it hooked up to the wrong connection. Okay, let's try that again. So this is coming from power. Huh? Either the needle's going up or I'm deceived. I don't know. I'm probably deceived. I can play with that arm. So I've lowered it, so we should be at empty. Getting a full 12 volts, but we're not getting that on the gauge. Every time I jump up and down, I hear my pants rip. There's a giant hole in them. So, testing shows that the sender is working properly, exactly as it's supposed to. So, alright, well, not sure we can dig into the gauge and check it out, I suppose, but it never really does anything because these gauges are, well, they're not fun. I don't know. We can try it. So I carefully started disassembling this gauge, and then once I saw that the inside was melted, I just took it apart. So, you know, you could see that it's melted a good bit. The plastic is melted, and even this coil here is loose. So yeah, there's a lot of that whole thing is melted there. It's supposed to look more like that, you know, solid. Clearly the coils are bad and destroyed. There's been some melting going on in there. It got too hot. Obviously there's a lot of corrosion, but that necessarily wouldn't stop anything from working. Everything was still, for the most part, hooked up, but I'm going to guess that this is blown inside, so yep, she is not working. Even if this wasn't blown, it wouldn't really have been able to work really well because the coils aren't aligned anymore, and this one's loose and wobbly in here, and yeah, it's just a mess. So unfortunately, that's what happens with these gauges. These old Russian gauges are something else. I mean, they got real glass, but they're all, you know, all metal parts, and they're actually fairly well built. If it wouldn't be for the electronics, electrical parts, they would probably last forever, because, you know, even the gauge needle's metal. Everything's just metal on these things, which is great for durability, but when your coil melts, when your coils melt, that's not going to do the trick. So unfortunately, that gauge is toast. Well, we may not be able to put a gauge on right now, but because our discovery of what the second contact does, which is it only closes when that float is pretty low, we can put a low fuel light on this thing, and that'll at least give us, you know, some indication of when fuel is low. You know, it'll say, hey, refuel before you run out of diesel. So to demonstrate this, I've wired up a light here temporarily till I can, you know, put it in the dash. And so basically I turn on power. Right now the light is lit because our float is, well, it's pretty low right now. But if I take my handy dandy float modifier here and lift up the float with that, then the light goes off. So all we have to do is install this in our dash. So got our fuel light installed and a note on the dash. So now you have no excuse for running it out of fuel, because if in doubt, there's a dipstick in the tank and that light should tell you you're in doubt. So that's done until we can get a fuel gauge, and then that'll look a lot nicer. Yeah, I know it's far away, but get that out of your way there. All right, I know it's a little far away, but keep an eye on the needle there, and I can't hold it any closer because I got two hands. All right, let's see what happens. No, that's opposite. Okay. Oh. I pegged the needle. Oh, there we go. Yep, okay, it does do something. All right. Which was that? Well, now I was going to label them, and probably doesn't take a, just like I suspected, I don't think it takes a full 12 volts, but so it's the opposite. So red is negative. And mark that. Interestingly, I don't see any markings for the contacts on here. I guess you're just supposed to know. How very Russian of them. You're just supposed to be knowledgeable in this stuff and without excess instructions. Let's put this in and run a wire. So I got two wires run here, both in red, of course, because that's the way we roll. One for power, keyed power from the fuse panel, which the whole fuse panel is switch operated. And one goes out to the fuel gauge, which I've just run it, you know, in a convenient bundle. And over here, does it look good? No, we've just added to the rat's nest of wiring, but I don't care. Wiring on these things doesn't exactly look pristine to begin with. So let's put this in. What you do is these are insulators, and you run this, you know, you run these through the holes, and then these go around the studs. Oh no, let's just loosely hook the wires up here and then turn on power here and see what happens. Oh, we pegged the gauge. Okay, I know it's not supposed to be pegged because it's like less than half a tank. More than quarter, but less than half. All right, what are we doing here? There's something I don't, there's clearly something I don't know about these gauges. Usually they're just a resistance circuit. I don't know, let's look this up and just make sure we know what we're doing here. All right, I've checked my service manual, everything I can find, wiring diagram. In the wiring diagram, the hot side just goes right to the terminal block. It connects to the battery at 12 volts, and the ground goes through the sender like I have it hooked up. I don't know. Let's double check this. I have a C battery is 1.5 volts, or it should be if it's in good condition. So we should at least register a tiny bit of needle movement here instead of, hopefully it won't peg or anything. Yeah, just a tiny bit of movement. Okay, now let's see at 9 volts. Which one's a negative? I can never remember. That's negative. I see it pegs at 9 volts. I feel like this is supposed to operate at like 6 or something. I'm confused. But it says 12 volts right on there. You don't believe me. Right there. Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on here. Do I have a defective gauge? Am I hooking it up wrong? Is there supposed to be another ground? Is the case supposed to be grounded? Let me ground the case and see if that makes a difference. Let's ground the case like it would have to be grounded for this bulb to work, but no. Okay, I'm confused. Terribly confused here. But I mean, if it was like 6 volts, 1.5 should be like a quarter tank, and the needle barely moves. So what am I missing here? I've got to be missing something. And when this is installed, the case will be naturally grounded in the, because it goes through the console. So let's double check the gauge here. Not the gauge. Let's double check the sender here. I'm just going to connect my meter directly to it. So right now 2.5 ohms. I'll push it down further. It goes down to 0.8-ish. Raise it up. It goes up to 90 ohms. And it registers in between. Our sender is definitely working. And believe it or not, it's been a couple of years since I did the float repair. That float is still floating. I'm sure you just watched the footage of whatever I used to repair it, but I don't remember. So whatever I did, it's holding up. So that speaks to whatever I did. Don't remember what it was, but all right. I think our gauge is toast. Anyway, we know it's a 0 to 90 ohm sender. That's a pretty common fuel gauge. I think that's GM fuel gauge. I don't know. Let's probably have to throw away this really expensive $60 fuel gauge that I waited forever to get shipped from Ukraine, but we don't really have a choice here. Alright, put all this back in. Let's double check our fuel gauge. We've got to be doing something wrong or something. That's brand new out of the box. So at this point you're probably asking, well, why didn't you just buy a 0 to 90 ohm regular gauge out of the gate? Well, these Russian gauges are a little bit bigger. The regular standard small gauge size is something like 2 inches or like 52 millimeters, I think it is. These are bigger. These are, and it's a lot harder to find just regular gauges in this size that'll fit into the holes, because the normal ones are smaller and they just fall through. See, these are like 2.35 is the hole size they're made for. I don't know what that converts to in metric. You can do that yourself, but a lot bigger than 2 inch, and it just falls right through the hole when you use a regular gauge. So maybe I have to see if I can find a 2.35 0 to 90 ohm gauge. Well, this is disappointing. Very disappointing. Don't know what to do with that. I'll contact them, but I bought it months ago. I think I got it back in like March or something, and we're in, oh, what month are we in now? I think we're in September now, or we will be soon if we're not. So, very disappointed. All right, so I emailed the supplier of the Ukrainian gauge, and I double checked, and it did come from Ukraine, and they are not getting back to me. Basically, they've ghosted me. So either they're selling junk parts from the Cold War that were rejects back then, have been sitting on a shelf for 30 years, or I don't know. Anyway, what we have determined is that sender has a 0 to 90 ohm range, which is a standard gauge across for many different manufacturers. And so we have a generic gauge. Since I did these gauges, I found a guy online that makes these. And these are really cool. They're just 3D printed. I don't have a 3D printer. I wish I did, but these just slide right in here like that, and then your gauge goes in here. And the tolerances on this thing are just, they're spot on. They're like exact. I got to give this guy props. I wish I had his eBay store on here. I'll put it up because I'm really impressed with this guy. I don't think leaving a good review on his store is good enough. So I'm going to call him out here, whoever he is. If you're doing a conversion from a 2.5 to that, and it looks really slick too. You can tell these other gauges look like junk now, you know, because they've rusted, and that one I had to run screws through. And anyway, so I bet you're wondering if it has a standard metal clip on the back, how does that work? Well, let me show you. All you have to do is put this on and bend it a little bit, like so, and then that's all you need to do, and then it'll clip into against the metal housing back here like it's supposed to, because it doesn't take much. So this is really slick. I like this a lot, and I wish this guy was making these when I did the other gauges. Again, the tolerances, I mean, it's pretty tight in there, and it's pretty tight, like it clings to the gauge really good. So he did fantastic with the tolerances, and a 3D printer, it's hard to get, you know, reliable, very extremely fine tolerances like that unless you have good printers. So he's got to have good equipment, I imagine, or he knows exactly what he's doing. Anyway, very impressive. I can't say enough, because I've been getting such bad parts lately that to call out a good one makes me feel really good. The gauge itself is just some cheap Chinesium junk. we're not gonna talk about that. It comes with this wiring harness. I'll figure out the wiring here. Uh-oh, did I lose the... Well, by dumping that out, I lost the other nut. There's the other nut. Ah. So we'll screw that in, and we'll plug this in and figure out the wiring, and then we'll proceed here. Okay, I've got it temporarily connected. So we've got a little less than half of a tank, more than quarter of a tank, because the light doesn't come on the float. And when I looked inside, I think I remember it being about half-ish at the moment. So nothing. Oh, hey, we got fuel. I think that's accurate. Seems like it should be. We've also got a backlight connection. Let me see if I can find a wire. I don't know if I'm going to use the backlight, but get on there. I'm guessing backlight would be. Guessing you need power for that. Oh, hey, we got power. The backlight. Okay. All right. I probably won't use that at the moment because, well, I don't know if any of the lights on the other gauges work, to be honest. Some of them do, maybe. I think maybe the oil light, or I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's not a priority. Yeah. Shut that off. Goes down to 0. Seems pretty consistent. Okay. We have a fuel gauge. So if you're wondering, at least in the 92 versions, and I don't think I have any reason to suspect that the early ones are different, but at least in these versions, the fuel sender is 0 to 90 ohms. So, we answered that. Oh, that does look good in there, sitting in that bezel, doesn't it? Very nice. Now we have a complete suite of gauges. All right, let's finish wiring this in and add it to our wire rat's nest here. Probably use all red because that's the way we roll, you know. Okay, didn't wire in the lights because I don't worry too much about that. All right, she works and looks good too. I'll take it. So at long last, we've got a fuel gauge on this tractor, and not just the fuel light I've been running with. I don't think I released any video showing that I got the fuel light working or anything, because I was saving it for the gauge, which, you know, was always coming the next week and the next week and the next week, and kept putting it off and putting it off. But we finally got there. So that's what you get when you're using something all the time and you don't have time to take it down to work on it. So anywho, it's starting to rain here. You know, beautiful weather we're having. And anyway, we've got a fuel gauge. What did we learn? Fuel sender, 0 to 90 ohms. Good to know. And also it has that low fuel light, which I don't know if the tractor had originally, and I don't know how many of these actually have wired up, but if yours has 2 pins and a ground on the sender, that's probably what it is. It's a low fuel light. So kind of helpful, you know, as a backup for if your gauge fails, but good to keep track of. And also another warning light on your dash if you're not a gauge watcher like I am. So anyway, it took a while, but we got there, and this thing is getting to be a very complete tractor. I'm very pleased with it. So anyway, if you want to know more things about this tractor that I have not shot yet or anything, leave them down below and I can shoot more videos on this. I did have somebody request the brakes, and well, we're not doing so hot on the brakes because a while ago I snapped one of the bolts off in one of the covers and just I didn't worry about it. The brakes work if you slam on them hard enough, but they do need adjusted because the e-brake doesn't hold completely. You really got to crank it. It's at the end of its range. But those bands do need tightened in there. One of these times we might get to it, but we're going to have to pull the plate and the seat up out of the cab to get to those. Yeah, anyway, if you want to see anything else in this tractor, let me know in the comments and tell me what I did wrong down below as usual. And as always, thanks for watching.